All right, so we are in Module 6. We have Chapter 6, Process Costing. We're going to go over. I went over my introduction to Chapter 6 last Thursday, and if that made sense to you, great. If not, it's okay. I like to bridge it theoretically. I like to bridge process costing theoretically to everything that came before, but you can do it just fine even without that theoretical bridge. We're going to more or less start. Or rather, what I'm trying to say is we're going to start, and if you didn't quite catch or didn't really feel comfortable with where we ended Thursday, we'll be able to start you from scratch kind of today, and you'll have plenty of practical knowledge by the end of the day. We're starting with weighted average. So there are two methods that we cover, weighted average and FIFO. And we start with weighted average this module and the next module. We start with figuring out what the TEU, or total equivalent units, is, and then using that as the denominator to determine the cost rate, direct materials per equivalent unit rate, and the conversion cost per equivalent unit rate. Also transferred in cost per equivalent unit rate, but really that's just a different form of direct materials. There will be some questions that use TI, transferred in rates, but it'll operate the same way as if it were just direct materials. So if you know DM, you know TI. And then we'll work on taking those rates and multiplying them by equivalent units in next week's module. I call it applying costs. I'm pretty sure that's the terminology I use throughout in the textbook as well. And in weighted average, this might seem like it's a small step, and in many ways it is. But I separated it out because when we get to FIFO, now it'll be in 4 weeks' time. In 3 weeks' time from now, we'll be applying costs in FIFO, and that can be it's enough to require its own week to make sure we've got the steps right. When you've got them down, the steps are not hard. It's just making sure that you remember them all. And in many ways, process costing is a death by 1,000 cuts. Each individual step in isolation, it's super easy. It's not crazy math. It's not hard to remember. It's that it has 15, 20, 50 steps. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit. A lot of steps stacked on top of each other. And so the likelihood that you're going to get all of those perfect, there's a multiplication of probabilities of error, because each one has its own error rate. Each step has its own error rate. Even if each error rate is very small, when you add all of them together, you get more problems wrong than you like. All right, so the idea is we're just averaging out costs. That's basically process costing. We're going to take the costs and put them on a per capita basis. If you don't know that terminology, per capita, capita is sort of like per head, per person. Just every unit gets its own share of cost because it's a unit. We're not tracking anything, just that the unit exists. And also, I guess we do track what percent complete the ending inventory is at the end of the month. We're just counting how many units came through and how complete or incomplete the stuff left over is. And then mathematically, we're just going to assign costs based on that. We've tracked none of the direct materials, none of the direct labor, and no drivers that we're going to use to allocate overhead. No, it's just all going to come through mathematically based on a unit is a unit is a unit. And so step one here is to calculate total equivalent units. And when we're doing weighted average method, this is the equation that we use. And it's what was introduced in earlier in 6.1. But now this is formally our introduction here. So for weighted average, we have total equivalent units, and I'll even make a subscript, so doubly enforce it, is units completed plus ending WIP equivalent units. So that's how I'm going to abbreviate it. EU means equivalent units. And ending WIP equivalent units is what's in the second set of brackets right over here. It's the ending WIP units, or physical units, you might hear it said, times the percent complete of those physical units. And so I used the example of paper airplanes before, and I said, let's say we had 100 paper airplanes that were incomplete at the end of, we were making paper airplanes for 30 seconds. We had 100 of them. We started, but we didn't finish. Let's say on average, we did one of like 4 folds that is required. So they're 25% complete. So we're going to take those 100 paper airplanes with 1 fold each and say, well, you know what? If we had rearranged our effort and instead of doing 100 paper airplanes with 1 fold, done those 100 folds on just 25 paper airplanes, we'd have 25 complete paper airplanes. And so we're going to act like those 100 paper airplanes, 25% complete, is equivalent to having 25 complete paper airplanes. And so that's what is in right here. 100 paper airplanes times 25% completion. And so inside these brackets is going to be 25 equivalent units. So you have your completed units, which are, they really are, you can think of it as units completed times percent complete. Because they're units completed, they're always 100% complete. So we can just erase that. In the end, equivalent units is converting everything into its equivalent unit. Just some of those conversions are very, very easy, because if it's completed, then it's 100% complete. So the equivalent unit is the same as the physical unit. Doesn't matter. So we can get rid of that, and really we just focus on, take those ending WIP units, make sure you converted them into their percent complete, and make sure you've used the appropriate one. Because, now I'm going to get rid of this because I'm going to need it separately. We're going to have a separate TEU for direct materials and for conversion costs. I'm not going to include TI, transferred in costs, even though that occurs. But if you're familiar with direct materials, take all your knowledge from direct materials and transfer over to transferred in cost, and you can do those problems just as easily. And we'll go over them, make sure that you believe me. It gets its own subscript because the ending WIP equivalent units for direct materials is going to be different, or can be different, than the ending WIP for conversion costs, because the percent complete can be different for direct materials and conversion costs. The example of paper airplanes, there's only one piece of direct material that goes into a paper airplane, which is the sheet of paper. At least our level of paper airplanes. No fancy stickers or paint we're going to put on them. So just a sheet of paper. And once you start folding that sheet of paper, it already has all the paper it's going to have. It's 100% complete with respect to direct materials. So the ending WIP with respect to direct materials for those 100 airplanes that are only 25% complete through the conversion folding process is 100 times, actually 100% complete with respect to direct materials, like I said, because they have all the paper they're going to need. But they are 100 paper airplanes times the 25% here, and you're going to have 25 equivalent units for conversion costs, whereas you have 100 equivalent units for direct materials. So that's why you'll have different TEUs, meaning different denominators. So when you calculate rates, there will be a lot of tempting answer choices that will use the wrong TEU or something like that. So you got to keep these things as straight as possible, because again, there are like a million different little steps. Each one in isolation is fine. But when you stack them all on top of each other, lots of opportunities for mistakes. So in fact, let's go ahead and see if we can't find a question that asks us about TEU. All right, so one of the things I did when I took this into the shop is I tried very hard to emphasize the material, go out of my way to kind of give away some of the game of some of these questions and tell you what the question is asking. In part because in the exam, you're going to have all the weighted average and FIFO mixed together, and I want one less opportunity for you to make a mistake. I want the assessment to be of your knowledge. And I figured there's plenty of assessing capability of these questions without you just mistaking, oh, I thought it was a FIFO question, when it's really a weighted average question. So we're in the weighted average method, which is appropriate for this question we're asking. And we want to know total equivalent units with respect to direct materials in February. And I tried to as much as I could, emphasize those three kind of things. What method is it in process costing? What am I looking for? Total equivalent units, or cost per equivalent, which is a rate, or total cost in units completed, or whatever, which is applying cost, step number 3. And then when possible, and maybe sometimes I might have missed this last part, but a lot of the questions I also emphasized which one I'm looking for, just to be extra nice to you. All right, so we're looking for direct materials TEU. And I think I have Excel up. No, I don't have it up yet. Let's pull it up. If we have Excel, I'll bring it over in a minute. Let's read the question here. Olson Company processes lumber into a product called medium density fiber board for the month of February, and I try not to play time games either. The period is a period is always the question in the period. For the month of February, it had 2,000 square feet of medium density fiberboard in process at the beginning of the month. Okay, so beginning WIP is 2,000 square feet. Another 42,500 square feet were put into process during February. And 4,000 square feet were still in process at the end of February. All right, so we have our beginning work in process, 2,000 square feet. Our ending work in process, 4,000 square feet. And we have the number of units started, 42,500. 42,500 square feet. What we don't have is units completed, and that's in the equation. We need units completed. A lot of the questions do this. I do make you play the T account game. After a short time, though, it'll be second nature to you. So here's what I usually... that's a nice one. Here's what I usually do with these questions. This is like create a T account. A unit T account. Not track dollars, but to use the logic of T account to help me discern where the physical units are going. So we have 2,000 beginning WIP units. We added 42,500, and I'll convert this into Excel in a minute. And then we end up with 4,000 in ending WIP. And so our units completed is the amount that would be credited out and moved on to either the next WIP, the next department's WIP, or finished goods inventory, and it would be a debit to them. So this is what units completed is, and we need that for our TEU calculation. And I'm going to make you tease it out. In a lot of the questions that are about TEU, you tease it out. So it has to balance. The debits and credits have to balance. We have 44,500 credits here. Excuse me, debits here. We have to take away a certain amount and we end up with 4,000. So we have 2,000 plus 42,500 minus X equals 4,000. And if you're a finance person, you're not really, T accounts don't come second nature to you. You can simply memorize, algebraically ends up being this. Right, because we can add X both sides, and we can subtract 4,000 from both sides. And we end up with beginning WIP plus units started minus ending WIP, that's the 4,000 here, equals units completed, which we're looking for. So this is the first step for a lot of these TEU equations, is to get units completed by adding these two, subtracting these two, and it gives you that plug. Which in this case is 44,500. No, 40,500. Right, because it took away 2,000 less than we started with in the period. All right, put that into an Excel file here. Okay, that's our units completed. And what I like to do also is take a little note and say, I like to say the percent complete over here for beginning WIP and for ending WIP. And in this question, I don't give you the percent complete. I don't say how complete these 4,000 units are and how complete these 2,000 units were at the beginning of the period, which is going to become a problem. Now, the other thing to note about this question is it has a different arrangement than I said, and a different arrangement than the paper airplane example. All right, so the paper airplane example is where all direct materials are added at the beginning of the process. There are a lot of questions like that. It's not the only way that it can happen. Sometimes they give you a percent. Direct materials has its own percent. Sometimes it's the same percentage conversion cost, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it has a rule that says all direct materials are added at the beginning of the process. That's a paper airplane example, paper airplane problem, if you want to code that in your head. And then there are these, which I like to call the dumpling problems, because they stick with you long afterwards. It's a dumb joke. But no, because the process is like cooking dumplings or noodles or whatever. Okay, so how do you cook noodles or dumplings? You boil water in a pot, right? Do you end up eating that boiled water? No, please, no. Safety hazard, okay? So it's not a direct material for the finished product, is it? Yeah, so the water, the pot, or wear and tear to the pot, the energy, electric or gas or whatever that's required to heat it, are all overhead costs. And the you, who's doing the work and watching the pot boil, and therefore it never happening, right, is the labor. Those are all conversion costs. There's a long chain of conversion costs before you add any direct materials. And then it takes a while to boil up. Now it's boiling. You debate with whoever's there with you about whether it's a real boil or it's a rolling boil or what is it, you know? And then you put in the dumplings or the noodles or whatever, right? So the materials that you're actually eating are added in the middle of the process. And that's this kind of problem. All direct materials are added when the units are 50% complete with respect to conversion costs. There's a process of conversion, a lot of prep time in the conversion process, and then we add the materials, and then there's some finishing of the conversion process once the materials are added. Okay, so that's this style of question. And if we had the percents complete, let me just put in some. Let's say, for example, these are 0.25% complete and 0.4% complete. Rather, 0.25 meaning 25% complete, and 0.4 meaning 40% complete. So if we had that information, if that were provided in the problem, then these are the percents with respect to conversion costs, is what I'm trying to say. Then, have any materials been added for those 4,000 units in ending WIP? They're only 40. The water's just starting to have little bubbles in it. It's not yet at 50% when all the materials are added. So are there any direct materials in it? No. Maybe there literally are, but companies are trying to be very simple in their model of the process, and they're just going to say, look, if it's not at 50%, nothing. That's this idea. This company has decided we're just going to have a rule. If it's not to 50% yet, we're going to act like there's no direct materials. And so, yeah, I'll write it in the Excel file here. So the EWIP EU with respect to conversion costs is at 4,000 times the 40%. But the EWIP EU, meaning equivalent units, with respect to direct materials, is at 4,000 times 0. It hasn't reached the threshold yet. They all get added at 50%. It's not yet at 50%, so there are 0 direct materials in there. Now, I just happened to, by dumb luck, happen upon the question that did not give me these percentages. So can we solve this problem? Can we get an any WIP equivalent unit without a percent complete? We cannot. So this is a play action one. This is me keeping you honest, and this actually cannot be determined with the information I didn't give you enough. So it's a terrible one to start on, this problem. Let's start on a different one then. Okay, now this one looks like it has enough information, I think. Yeah. And there's no option for it not to be enough information. So let's go with this one. All right, so this is, call this dumpling problem without enough info. All right, this one is also weighted average, looking for TEU. Now it's looking for TEU with respect to conversion costs. Okay, so this is CC TEU problem. And this one is a paper airplane problem. Look at, I see right here, all raw material is added at the beginning of the process. Well, conversion costs are added uniformly throughout the production process. All right, that second part of this, it just means I'm going to give you a percent. That's what it means. I think there might be some holdovers. It's possible, it's theoretically possible that there are some holdovers that say use the word ratably. Things are added ratably. That's also in a bunch of textbooks. That just means I'm going to give you a percent complete. There's a whole process, a whole little bunch of, it has a continuous graduation of percent complete that it has, and we have to observe where it is on that curve. Compared to a big step of they're all added at the beginning, or they're all added at 50%, or whatever. That's what it's trying to say. It's not one of those big lump sum, everything's added at once. So I'm going to have to give you the percent of where it is on the curve. And yeah, sure enough, I say 75% complete with respect to conversion costs right here. Let's read the whole problem. Olson Company processes lumber in a product called medium density fiberboard. We're going to get bored of fiberboards by the end of this quiz. For the month of February, it has 400 square feet of medium density fiberboard in process at the beginning of the month. Let me try and make sure I'm articulating all those words. I'll write it down. 400 beginning WIP. And we don't know the percent complete, as far as I can tell. And with the weighted average questions, we usually don't need that. We don't ever need that, I think. Yeah, I can say that. We will with FIFO. With weighted average questions, there will be a lot of red herrings with beginning WIP, percent completes. We don't need to know that. Another 46,000 square feet were put into process during February. All right, 46,000 were started. And we had 200 square feet in process at the end. So that's our ending WIP, 200 square feet. And I already know down here that they're 75% complete. All right, so 0.75. This is with respect to conversion costs. I can even write in, give myself an extra row here. I can write in CC, percent complete. Okay, great. Now I can take the same idea. It's beginning WIP plus units started minus ending WIP and figure out what the units completed has to be. Because TU equals units completed plus ending WIP equivalent units, which is ending WIP units times percent complete. So same thing. Ending WIP equivalent units is the same thing as it was in the parentheses right here. But we need units completed. All right, so that's units completed. Okay, we'll follow the what we did over here. We'll put ending WIP. I'll grab these two. So with respect to conversion cost, it's going to be that 200 times the percent complete, or right here, 150. So that's our ending WIP equivalent units. And if the question was asking, what are the equivalent units in ending work in process? That would be the right answer. But it's not asking for that. It's asking for TEU. So TEU equals units completed plus ending WIP equivalent units. So let me add, with respect to conversion costs here, is the units completed plus the ending WIP equivalent units with respect to conversion costs. So that should be the answer right there. Okay? Any cells you want to see? I hope it's clicking pretty well. And if not, with a few reps, it will click. This is step one. This is all step one's asking. Get TEU. It's important because we need to know the base upon which we're going to divide out the costs. We're doing a per capita basis. This is how many capita do we have? It's the denominator. We're going to use this to create rates that we're going to use to divide out the costs between how many dollars go to ending WIP and how many dollars go to units completed. So we need to know the equivalent units in each of those to get our denominator, TEU. Okay. Now let's go back to the textbook just for a second here. Ooh, now you got FIFO. All right. In the textbook, I do explain weighted average, then explain FIFO. Step one, we have weighted average, 6.3.1. We have FIFO, 6.3.2. So skip over the FIFOs because we're not doing them this week. Skip over that. Step number two, weighted average rates is step number two. Cost allocation is step number three, or apply costs. Weighted average step number two, we have our denominator already. We calculated total equivalent units for either direct materials or conversion costs or all of them. And we just need a numerator. What cost are we going to be splitting out? And for weighted average, it's pretty For both of them, this is pretty easy, but it is different for the two of them. For weighted average, we include the beginning WIP costs. That's what makes it a weighted average, actually, is how we treat beginning WIP. That's the difference between the two. It plays out in a couple different steps that are different between weighted average and FIFO, but the real difference is how we treat beginning WIP costs. So we take the beginning WIP costs and we add the current period costs of whatever category we are talking about. So if we're doing a direct materials rate, the direct material costs that are within beginning WIP costs. The direct materials costs incurred this period. That's our total direct materials cost. That's the numerator, because we're getting a direct materials rate. And then we go back and we take the conversion costs that are in beginning WIP plus the conversion costs that were incurred this period to get our conversion cost per equivalent unit rate. So let's jump to a question. And so we did step number one. In fact, I did step number one for you in this question. This question is just to see if you can do the rate calculation. I don't test you on TEU here. So if you forgot everything in your mind about how to calculate TEU, you still get incremental points for knowing how to do the rate on this question. So this question is asking for the cost per equivalent unit with respect to direct materials. So I need direct materials rate. And it already gave me the TEU for direct materials and the TEU for conversion costs. Do we need anything in this column over here, this conversion cost column? The answer is no. We don't need anything over there when we're just figuring out the rate for direct materials. We just need what's in here. So these steps over. This is, let's say rate question for direct materials. So we have TEU 160,000. We have beginning WIP cost with respect beginning WIP DM cost, current period DM cost. I'll just move them over so I don't have to keep resizing the columns of 1.5 million. And I told you that the numerator, when we're doing weighted average, is going to be the sum of beginning WIP costs and current period costs. So I'm just going to call it numerator, or total cost is how it is in the textbook. That's how we're defining total cost for the weighted average method. And we can take that and divide it by our TEU, and we get a rate. Not a word. DM cost per equivalent unit. That's the answer. That's it. Okay. In isolation, not too tricky, right? I mean, one thing, I'm walking you through it, helping you read, interpret the information the question's giving you. So that's an element of this that makes it easier. But even if you were on your own, like you have to do a summation and division. That's it. Okay? There are some places where you could still go awry. You could forget that you need to ignore conversion costs. You could forget whether or not you include, especially once we've gone over FIFO, you'll say, well, do we include beginning WIP? Do we not? You memorize that, include beginning WIP. That's going to be important when we're in weighted average method. And you could also think, well, I got to go out and calculate something. Your TEU calculation instincts might be so well developed that you're like, well, I got to do some calculations for it. I might have enough data that you think you need to go do that. I might have enough, and you're going to then say, oh, well, I need to take this. Let's say I need to take this TEU and add ending WIP equivalent units or something like that. You're going to misinterpret it and add some extra stuff that you don't need. I've seen a lot of different ways people to mess it up. Okay. Not too hard, right? It's given in the problem. That's what I'm trying to write there. Oh no, here and below are dollars. And this is also $1. Yeah, Hannah. I added the beginning WIP direct materials cost, $100,000, and the current period direct materials cost of $1.5 million. So we should stop class. That's it. That's this week. I'm not literally stop class. We'll go through more. Don't worry. I'm not that nice. You know me by now. So that's it. I mean, I feel like we really have covered the majority, if not all, the bases these questions are going to give you. Now it's a question of getting the right mental connection so that you can recall in the moment the necessary factoids, and each one is a little factoid. It's pretty small. Like I said, each step in isolation is not too hard. In the moment, and get the question right. Leave. Step the. I'll get rid of it all. Okay. So let's try some more questions. See some more ways in which you might get tricked here. Let's try some open answer questions. How about that? All right. So here's a TEU with respect to transferred in costs. Okay. So a firm uses the weighted average method for process costing. It has 805 units beginning WIP at 16% complete with respect to conversion costs. All right, let's start writing up our question. This is our open answer TEU question. Let's write it in code so no one can figure out what we're saying. 805, I want to write here. 805 beginning WIP units, and they're 0.16% complete. They're 0.16% complete because they're 16% complete. I'm saying decimals and percents all mixed up, sorry. Next sentence says there are 16,201 units that we started during the period, and 516 units in ending inventory that are 40% complete. So we'll put 0.4 right there. All direct materials and transferred in costs are added at the beginning of the process. Okay, so this is like a paper airplane problem. Lump sum at the beginning. If they're even a fraction of a percent complete with respect to conversion costs, that means they have all their direct materials and all their transferred in costs. So this is a situation where there was a prior department that cut down the tree and planed the lumber and created the paper, and they hand off the paper to us. That's all the costs of doing that get transferred in, and now we are going to fold the airplane. That's our department. So transferred in costs come in, and they're at the very beginning of the process. So here, let me expand here a little bit. We have dumb little if statement here. This is DM and TI percent complete. This is CC percent complete. So I wrote down from the question how complete each beginning WIP and ending WIP is with respect to conversion costs. That's this column right here. Direct materials and transferred in costs are all out at the beginning, and so if this is greater than 0, they're 100% complete. That's what this if statement does, that's all, which is kind of dumb because obviously it's going to be greater than 0. And so our ending WIP here with respect to transferred in costs, which is the important number we need, is 100% complete. That's 516 units that are 100% complete with respect to transferred in costs. All right, we're going to need that later. How do I get units completed? What's the equation for that if you don't remember it, or if you just know by gut because you just live in T accounts? Yeah.
The amount you started during the period plus your beginning minus the ending.
Excellent. Yes, that's right. Okay, yeah. So the sum of these two right here, beginning WIP and started, minus ending WIP units. Don't equivalentize. No equivalent units. We're just doing whole units now to figure out the whole units completed. No equivalent units needed. No percents complete. Just get this. Just add, subtract. Great. Okay, so now we have our units completed. Let's organize things a little bit more. Units completed equals that. And now we have EWIP EWIP equivalent units, and we're in transferred in cost land. So we have ending WIP units times what's their percent complete? $40 for transferred in costs. It's 100%. For conversion costs, they're 40% complete. If we were doing conversion costs ending WIP equivalent units, we would need to have 516 times 40%. But since we're doing transferred in, we need the transferred in percent complete right here. So I'll even draw because it's so exciting. A little T account. Oh, missed a square. There we go. This is not a dollars T account. This is a units T account. So I have to find everything when it's shrunk half screen, and it takes me a while to find it in the ribbon. All right, so there's our I've just made the notes to the side for these two right here, what their percents complete are, the beginning WIP and ending WIP. And now we have these right here. So now our total equivalent units is going to be some of these. Is that right? I see a nod. Good. We agree? Okay, yeah, because DEU equals units completed, check, plus ending WIP complete units, which is ending WIP units times their percent complete. I can even make it exactly how I say, which is that right there. And so that is our TEU, which is all it's asking for. So that's the answer. Yeah.
Why is it 100% again, not 40%?
It's 100% because by rule, it says that all the direct materials and transferred in costs are added at the beginning of the process. So there are maybe 2 extra steps I'm having you logic through in a lot of the questions. And maybe I'm just mean, but regardless, it's how the questions are. I think there's an assessment point to it. This is one of them. Is really, I want you to read that and say, I can convert that sentence into information about what the percent complete is with respect to direct materials and transferred in costs. This means that all ending WIP units are 100% complete with respect to both those.
So if the question was in respect to conversion costs, then you use it.
Yes, exactly. So if we were trying to find TEU with respect to conversion costs, we would use the same units completed, but now, we're going to write it out again. We need to take that 516 and multiply it by the percent complete with respect to conversion costs, which is 40%. And so now our denominator for our TEU, which is the denominator for the rate, for conversion costs is a little bit less than our TEU for transferred in costs. Yeah, okay.
So transferred in costs, that means you use direct materials?
Yeah. It's costs that are transferred in, which almost always means that there's some material that a previous department did work on, incurred costs on, and now it's transferred to us, and we're going to continue the process of working on it. So maybe I misunderstood the question, but the idea is transferred in costs are costs attached to a direct material from a prior department. Maybe the answer is yes, whatever costs. So they incurred direct materials buying whatever raw materials they needed. They incurred overhead and they incurred labor, the conversion costs, to get the units to whatever was complete for their department. And they took those units that are not yet finished goods, but they're complete enough for the department and pushed them over to our department. And all those costs they incurred got moved over. Yeah.
But here we're just moving over the direct materials.
Yes, I guess what I should say, maybe this will answer better, is once it's done from their end, no matter what the category was, direct materials conversion or transferred in for them, it's to us, it doesn't matter. It's all just transferred in. It loses its identity as a conversion cost from their department, Now it's just a transferred in cost. Maybe I'm misunderstanding even worse.
Well, basically,
Yeah.
no, that helps, but I'm trying to find the difference between why we use the first approach, the 17,000 versus
This down here.
below it.
So these are not just, these are our conversion costs, our department. And we've only done, these 516 are only 40% of the way through our process, whereas they've incurred all the transferred income. We're not going to send them back to the other department to get more processing done. They're done as far as that's concerned. By rule here, it says all the transferred in costs are added at the beginning of the process. I guess the answer might be that might help is I put in that sentence, and a company lives by a sentence like that, just to simplify the idea. That once it transfers over, once it crosses over from their section of the factory floor to our section of the factory floor, those are all, it's got all of its costs now that they incurred, and we're just calling it 100% complete with respect to that. I don't know, does that help at all?
It does. Just more specifically,
Mhm.
what part of that question prompts that first answer, the 17,000, as opposed to the 16,000?
This sentence right here, this one right here says all direct materials and transferred in costs are added at the beginning of the process. So the moment it touches our process in our department, it's 100% complete.
Okay.
Which transfers to this. So we're going to take those ending whip units. If they're ending whip in our department, that means they got started somehow in our department. So they've already arrived. Our process with them has begun, but it hasn't finished yet. And they might only be 40% done as far as what we do. But by that sentence that I read, that means that they've already got all their transferred in costs, and we're just going to consider them 100%, which is transferred to 1 in decimal form of their transferred in. And so therefore that 516 gets multiplied by 1. That gives us this number here, which is why this number is different. It's just this is making these two different, and that's because of these two being different.
But when it got transferred in, we got that 17,000. That's what we have. That's the transferred in cost, so 17,006. I mean, total equivalent units. Yeah, the 17,000.
I want to say yeah. If that's clicking for you, yeah.
That's what we put there. That's our answer.
Yep. That's right there.
Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, good question. And it's trying to model the flow of this continuous mass production process. And so it's not tracking how the flow actually goes. It's just trying to make an approximation of how it's trying to make a model. Yeah, a model of how it's going. So it gets a little murky sometimes when you ask questions like, well, when was this added? When was that added, or whatever? And we're like, we don't really know some of the, at least one version of what you were saying. I was thinking to myself, like, there's a way in which I could think down that rabbit hole and say, I don't really know when such and such was added or whatever. I mean, this might not have been your question, but it does bring me to say, sometimes I have and students do get frustrated by, we really, things do get lost. This is like that I Love Lucy episode, where the chocolates are coming across the conveyor belt, and they're coming really fast, and so Lucy and her friend, I don't know the show very well, but I know this clip. Lucy and her friend are there, and they start eating them because they can't process them quickly enough across the conveyor belt or whatever, and we don't really know everything that happens along the way. We just know at the end of the period, here's what we started with, here's what we added, here's what we ended up with. And so by deduction, we're going to have this number completed. And by rule, we're considering all the ending whip 100% complete with respect to direct materials and with respect to transferred in costs. And we've estimated that the conversion process is 40% complete in our department. I think one thing that might help, and this I don't think this was your question, but one thing that I think I didn't quite give fully is a good example of the idea of transferring across. Maybe you're satisfied with my examples, but the paper airplane example that I said was maybe there's a prior department that like cut down the tree and made paper, and now they transfer the paper to us. And I guess it's a good enough example because if we are this full, our company does the whole thing from tree responsibly harvested and replanting and whatever. Let's assume that or whatever if that floats your boat. To end product of paper airplanes, which is really in demand, especially among elementary school students. And so we might very well have several separate departments. One department, which is, let's say one department is a lumberjack department where they go out and they harvest the trees and then they get shipped off. So they literally are going to incur their direct materials and their conversion costs to convert a certain acreage of trees into a certain number of felled and on truck tree trunks that are now being shipped over to our factory. And we have a second department, which is the pulp making and paper creation factory, where they take the log trees and then they make pulp out of them, process it into paper. And so they're kind of build the cost of the lumberjack department. Those costs, they accumulate through the lumberjack's direct materials and conversion costs. They accumulate those, and then, no, that's one that didn't work. And then in the actual T account, not the units T account, in the actual T account, once it leaves the lumberjack, this is the lumberjack's work in process account. It's going to be credited to the lumberjack account and debited as transferred in costs to the pulp factory. I'm going to call it that. And they add their direct materials and conversion costs to convert the logs into paper. And once they're done, they're going to credit them. And I'm going to go down here. And now we arrive at the schoolroom here, where we are the paper airplane department. So it's credited to them and debited here to us as transferred in costs. And we add our own direct materials, if we have direct materials to add beyond what they transfer over to us, and conversion costs. And then when we're done, it goes over to the finished goods inventory. And then when it's sold, it goes over to cost of goods sold. And the rest of the story is covered in 304 and 290 and whatnot. And so this includes all their direct materials and conversion costs. And then we add our own, and then we credit it over. And that becomes this next department's. Oh, I put us here. Anyway, let's say we're here then. And this becomes the next department. Then they add their own direct materials and conversion costs. And eventually the costs go over to finished goods. They just keep stacking upon stacking upon stacking. And that's the basic idea. And what it does is one of the things it does is, this is where it gets the name, is that the lumberjack department has its own process, and we care about tracking costs at the level of the process. And so it's got its costs set and determined. We're not tracing to a level below that. We're not tracing to individual product units, direct materials, direct labor, or overhead. At this level, we're tracing. At the process or department level, we're tracing costs. And they move between processes. That's all we're doing. That's as specific as we want to be with the costs. And so to do that, we have all these averages that we're creating through fancy denominators of TEU and through what do we include in the numerator, which is going to vary between weighted average and FIFO. Okay. Sorry, I was thinking about that minutes before your question. I was like, I need maybe to kind of complete that thought. Okay, other questions? I'm going to go to the next open answer one or find another open answer one here. Okay. Let's do a nice big open answer question here. So this one here is asking us for a rate of direct materials cost per equivalent unit. All these rates are dollar cost per equivalent unit, which is why we need TEU in the denominator, total equivalent units in the denominator. That's where we get the EU in here, in the rate. Okay, so we're doing direct materials per equivalent units, the rate, and I don't give you TEU. So this is a more comprehensive problem. I think the open answer, I don't think of a lot of multiple choice questions that are comprehensive like this, but there are some of the open answer ones that say do the whole thing. And so this one we have to calculate TEU. We have to decide what costs to include in the numerator, and then do the division right, which that shouldn't be too hard, but there are ways to mess that up too. All right, so now let's go ahead and we'll do open answer, comprehensive, all capitals, direct materials, rate. Well, I guess that's what that means. All right, so I would like to do TEU first. I think that makes sense to calculate first. Anybody disagree? No? Okay. So TEU, I'll copy it over so I know what I need. I need units completed. All right, I don't have units completed. The professor didn't give me units completed. Gave me the standard 3, beginning WIP units, units started, and ending WIP units, and the percent complete with respect to conversion costs. Oh, and look, also there's a rule. Looks like direct materials are added at the beginning of the process. Oh, wait. Oh, we're looking for direct materials. So this is going to be important. This rule means that all ending WIP and beginning WIP are 100% complete with respect to direct materials. If nothing else, just memorize that fact. When you see this, it means all the beginning and ending WIPs are 100% complete with respect to direct materials. That's what I want you to gather. I could have just as easily written in 100% complete with respect to direct materials in this parentheses. 35% complete with respect to conversion costs, and 100% complete with respect to direct materials. But I want you to interpret the rule to do that. So let's create the T account here. Ooh, we'll use our nice fancy stuff here. All right, plug it in, 227 beginning WIP, and they are 0.35 with respect to conversion cost, 35% complete. We started 9501 units in the period, and we ended with 184 units that are 0.74% complete with respect to conversion cost. Now, the rule is simply that they're direct material. We don't have any indication of TI, so just direct materials. This is the very simple rule for direct materials. They're 100% complete if they're at all in our work in process, which beginning WIP and ending WIP are. So they're 100% complete. Specifically, this right here is 100% complete. And so I want to grab this and one more down. That should play nice. Okay, so units completed again is this 9544, which is beginning WIP plus started minus ending WIP. And then ending WIP is this 184 times the percent complete, which based on this one sentence here is 100% with respect to direct materials. And we're doing direct materials here, so. And then TEU, like it says, is units completed plus the ending WIP equivalent units, which is right here. And so this is our denominator. Is that so far so good? Any cells you want to see? Yeah.
Can I see the EWIP?
Yep.
So if I had, for mine, I have 76% of all direct materials are added at the beginning of the process. Are added when conversion costs. When I put 0.76 there, then instead of the 1, you're at 100%.
If I said direct materials are 76% complete,
Yeah.
yes, then it would be, yes, exactly, yep. Is there a question like that? Yep. Sometimes, like I said, sometimes I give you a rule like this, sometimes I give you the percent itself of direct materials or whatever. Sometimes there's a dumpling rule as well. They're added at a certain threshold in the middle of the process. I try to vary it up a little bit, but yes, that's right. Okay. I think my attempt here is to make sure that I've made it clear. I've helped delineate the process that's going on in my head when I do the problems, when I'm answering the problems. And so, yeah, if the percent is different here, then yeah, we would update that cell. Exactly. Okay, so we have a denominator now, TEU. We need a numerator. So what should we include in the numerator? I'll copy over all the dollar amounts. 184, BUIP-DM, 1517, BUIP-CC, 80, 456 current DM, and then 115086 current period conversion costs. Which of these do we include in the numerator? Which ones do we exclude? We only include the direct materials. And all the direct materials? I think you want to say yes, right? Yes, but I'm making you doubt. So yes, you're right. You're right. Sorry, I didn't mean to make you doubt. You're right. I think what you said before, it made me think you meant all of the direct materials, just the direct materials. Yeah. And I made you think you were wrong. So yeah, we add the beginning WIP and the current direct materials cost to get the total DM cost. Great, that's our numerator. So numerator means it goes on top, denominator means it goes on bottom, meaning that's our rate, 8.46. We'll just round it by backspace. Okay. I'm tempted to add two thoughts that kind of are about future things. So if you don't like to think about the future, ignore what I'm about to say. The first thing is, next week, there are some open answer questions that have you do the rate, calculate the rate, either the whole thing, just like this, and then go apply it, which is step number 3, which we're covering next week. Or they give you TEU and use TEU to calculate the rate and then do the application. I can't program it to give the answer that you would get if you round the rate to cents in the middle of that process. So if now the idea is we have 100,000 units you need to apply that to, and then I actually say, oh, well, yeah, but we would round it to 2 before we apply it to that 100,000. So you get different answers there. $21 different. And in reality, we probably would round the rate so it could be manageable, people can understand it, and talk about it. Maybe we wouldn't, but if people are touching it, we're probably going to round it. If the computers are the only one touching it, then we'll leave it like this. That's fine. But people are touching it, we're probably going to round it so it's parsimonious to the people. I can only get it to do this. And so when you're doing the Excel next week, don't round the rates in the middle. Round the final answer, but don't round the rates in the middle. Okay? I have tried my best to make sure when that comes up in those open answer questions that are there next week, that I've given enough range that I'll catch most, if not all, of the answers where you do make the mistake and round in the middle. You do make the choice to round in the middle, but there's a possibility I haven't caught it. And so to preclude that even being an issue, just don't add the extra step of, I'm going to round that rate. Just leave it in the cell. If you're doing it by hand, just leave it as a bunch of decimals as far out as you can. And then, or at least as far out, as many digits as there are for whatever you're going to multiply it by, and then the difference won't be that big. If that makes sense. All right. So that's the first thing I was going to say that's presaging in the future. The second thing is even further in the future, which is this step right here. It seems really dumbly intuitive. It's like, well, yeah, when I'm talking about total costs, I would include like the total of the costs. It's in the name. FIFO is weird and doesn't believe that. It's nicer than that, but the point is, that's when it's a little different. And it defines total costs a little differently, and for a good reason. But just know this is a step that seems really dumb right now, that will be different between weighted average and FIFO. And so when you do the problems all in context in the final exam and you're doing some weighted average and some FIFO, this will be some that you have potential to miswire your brain and get the questions wrong just because you applied the wrong method. I don't want to go through all the reasons why FIFO does what it does because we have a whole week, 2 weeks for that. But put a little pin in there. Be like, okay, I'm doing this, and it's important that I remember that I am doing the total of beginning WIP and current period costs of whatever cost category we're in for a reason. And later on, there will be a little different thing that we do. All right. Should we find another problem? Okay, I saw a nod. I was open to the idea that we're kind of maybe we've reached optimal learning, and we're getting diminishing returns. But if we want another problem, that's fine. I'm happy to do more reps. Let's go. You want a TU, a rate? You want to find another comprehensive problem like that one? I can draw again. I got a good response from comprehensive. Okay, good. Now let's draw again and get a comprehensive open answer question. Let's see. It's very similar. Not the same. Let's just try one more time. I want to try. Wait, what was that? Was that similar? Oh. Well, I submitted it, but let's try this problem. Okay. Oh, I don't need all of that. I'll copy this stuff and see if it works. If this works for you to copy over things from problem to problem, then great, more power to you. I gave you the ability to use Excel in the exam. Use it to leverage it as you can. Don't let your leveraging of it make novel mistakes, of course. So we can't use exactly everything from the last problem. We'll have to modify just the right things from the last problem. But yeah, we can use a lot of what's in the last problem. All right, so we're still using the weighted average method. We still want a direct materials cost per equivalent unit. But look, this sentence is different. All direct materials are added when conversion costs are 51% complete, because we're pedantic. Just 51. Because it randomly generated a number, that's why. I think. Pretty sure this one is just within a range here. All right, 51% complete. And right now, I want to, while that thought is in my head, I'm going to go look and say, okay, these ending WIP units, have they reached that threshold? They have not. So are they 100% or 0% complete? They're 0. So I'm just going to put that right now. These are 0% complete, which means that this ending WIP equivalent units is 0. Doesn't matter. There could be 1 billion units in here. That's not a billion, but whatever. And they're still 0 in the TEU calculation. All right. So let's actually get the actual numbers. 159, 9,553. Oh, 159, and they're 0.33%, which also didn't reach the threshold, so that's 0% complete in beginning WIP. And ending WIP were 219, and they are 0.31% complete with respect to conversion costs. Just copy that over. And by rule, here I'll write the new rule, equals if this is greater than or equal to 0.51, then they are 100% complete. Otherwise, they are 0% complete. Copy that. They're both 0 because neither beginning WIP or ending WIP has reached the threshold at which we drop in all the dumplings or drop in all the macaroni or whatever we're cooking. And we're going to ignore the whole cheese packet at the end. Don't just imagine that doesn't exist. We're like doing actual pasta cooking, not what I do of the Kraft macaroni pasta cooking. Sorry, dumb joke. Maybe that's more confusing than it needed to be. Okay, so units completed is our number right here. And because there's no ending WIP, that's also our TEU. Our TEU is units completed plus ending WIP equivalent units. And with 0%, that's 0. So that comes up nice and easy. So let's do 1835. Let's copy it over. 1835, 102, 1012, 91884, 106, 507. And we're still doing direct materials costs. So we're going to total. We're in weighted average. So total means total. Beginning WIP, 1835, plus current WIP, 91884. We end up with 93719. And that's the numerator. So it goes on top. That's the denominator, so it goes on bottom. We end up with 9.87 as our, we would put that in right there as our rate, and we get it right. Happiness all around. Okay. Yeah.
What would you do if your conversion costs are your with respect to conversion costs or
Yeah, well, let's put that in. Let's say it was 75%. Then our direct materials would be 100% complete because they've passed the threshold. So we've dumped in all the dumplings in the pot. All the direct materials have been added. And so now our ending WIP is going to be that 219 times down 100%. Our TEU is still going to be the sum of units completed. Now this new 219 instead. And the numerator hasn't changed at all, just the denominator. So we end up with 9.64 instead of, what was the last one? 9.87. Yeah. So the rate goes down a little bit. Yeah. I would not suggest programming it in like I did here. This is to illustrate the rule in, I think it's a waste of your time on the exam and quizzes to do this. Just in your head be like, oh, it's not past the threshold. That means it's 0 or whatever. Yeah.
other questions or like the last sentence is the conversion cost per equivalent unit?
Yes. So if this were let's imagine that was what this asked. And we're going to go through and we're going to let's grab the whole thing over again. No. Let's just put program right here. Same units completed. But now we have we need ending WIP equivalent units with respect to conversion costs. And so this is going to be different. It's going to be the ending WIP units times the percent complete with respect to conversion costs. That 0.31, 31%. All right. And everything else, nope, will work out similarly until we get to deciding what total costs are. Now we're in conversion cost land. We're trying to do a conversion cost rate. So we need to sum the total conversion costs, beginning WIP conversion costs and current period conversion costs, and get a numerator there. And then we take that and create a new rate. So that numerator 107,519 now over the denominator 9560.89 TEU gives us 1125 it would be rounded to. Does that work out okay? Corey?
When would the beginning WIP conversion cost come into effect? Or is it kind of just there?
In FIFO. Okay. That's when it comes into effect. Yeah. It's there so that you want to put it into effect and you get the question wrong in a weighted average problem. In FIFO, it'll be important, but it's not important. Yeah.
I don't think it matters for this question, but it's just something that caught my attention. Why would our ending WIP have less percentage complete than our beginning WIP when it comes to costs?
So it's very possible because our beginning WIP 159 units, they probably got done like February 1st to February 2nd. Like they're done. They were a third of the way done at midnight February 1st, 33%, and we probably whipped those out and pushed them off to the next department or finished goods within the next 2 days. The 219 and ending WIP is an entirely separate group.
Okay.
So that's why these are.
So it's how much of that number of units are done essentially.
Yep.
Versus, that particular unit is that percentage close to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they are nameless, faceless, numberless units to us. We don't care about them. Insert joke you want here. University, they love you. They know you. But whatever. Lots of jokes you could take with that. But yeah, I think you got it. Yeah. Other questions? Okay. I think I see people starting to lean in their seat like they're ready to go. I told you we should be ready to go. Or I was ready. I was willing to let you go 2 minutes early in my beneficence. That's it. All right, let's start. Let's come back Thursday. We will do what we can to like hit this if we need to hit questions on this, and then we'll move on to the step number 3 in weighted average, and you'll be pros. It'll be great.